Welcome back, friends. Episode 3 of the Soul Sisters podcast. We are so happy to have you here. Thank you so much to everyone that has been tuning in or engaging with us on social media. We saw actually this morning, I just checked it, we have 3.9K interactions on our Spotify. So whether you were actually listening or just tuning in to see what we were all about and just interacting in that way, we thank you so much for being here with us. Alyssa actually has a statistic to share with us about 3 episodes list, right? 3 episodes. Most podcasts don't make it past 3 episodes.
Yeah. So thanks for clicking, even like how many times you clicked, but 90% of podcasts don't get past episode 3. So we are in celebratory mode because this is episode 3. Yay.
Yeah. And in episode 3, friends, we are diving into nature therapy, and we are so excited about this topic. This is something that not only I am so passionate and interested in, but Alyssa literally does this as a profession. This is what she went to school for. It works very hard to integrate these types of techniques with her patients and her clients. And so we are so excited to talk about this, and I can't wait to hear Alyssa's perspectives and just her overall professional opinions, as well as different options that we all have, especially coming off of the last episode, because the last episode was loaded with a lot of heavy stuff. And I heard from a lot of women after we recorded episode 2 regarding the gender health gap. And so I think a lot of these techniques that we're going to talk about today with nature therapy can really help us moving forward.
Yes. I have zenned myself out today. I went out in nature and just kind of sat, which was really nice. So it was nice to have this as a theme to keep me in check. Nature therapy is known as ecotherapy, green therapy, forest therapy. There's so many different things within that branch, but it's basically just being in nature or using natural elements to improve mental and physical health. And so, as you can probably imagine, that just encompasses and embodies so many different practices. And I think we're going to dive into some of those, and would love to hear your feelings too.
Before we dive into the actual practices, Liz, what inspired you to take this on as a profession? You know, I know you love being outside in general, both of us, we just love the outdoors, but what brought you to therapy, and then how did you integrate the nature part into your practice?
Oh, great question. I think with a lot of things, people are inspired by trauma as well as, hindered by trauma. And so I think just through the course of my own life, I've had my own, traumas with capital T's, and the things that helped me the fastest, the most long term, have been finding tools in nature to help me personally. And then once I kind of found out that it was a skill of mine, just being, safe and happy in nature and sharing that gift that I think I've kind of grown and always had. We all have that within us. I think that has inspired me to try to give that back to people who, just need a little bit of help or encouragement in finding what parts of nature therapy works best for each person. And that will change as the seasons change, as you change as a human. So I think that is what inspired me, generally speaking.
I love that. That's beautiful. And I think the way that you said at the end is gorgeous, in terms of you're seeing a lot of memes online right now, right? So it's like, remember that after all the rain comes, all the April rain comes May flowers, or remember that trees go to sleep all winter and then they wake up and they're beautifully green again, and they go through those seasons just like people do in life. So not even just talking about the way that nature can heal us, heal here on earth, it's also talking about how we are part of it, right? And from a spiritual standpoint, most of, if not all of, our energy goes back into Mother Earth. That's why we referenced grounding in our last episode as a source of calming therapy. That's one of those things that we're going to get into today in terms of techniques that we can dive into. And it's just remembering that everything in nature we are connected to on a spiritual level. It's not just us existing in this place. Let me go outside and touch the leaves to make me happy. It is that. It's totally that. But also, you're part of that. You're part of that energy source as well.
Yeah, there's some really like prominent organizations that have done a lot of like studies based on what Emily is saying. And there's something called the Blue Zones, and it's the healthiest, longest living populations in the world, such as Okinawa, Japan, a place in Italy, Costa Rica, Greece, and a specific location in California. And there's like 9 different aspects that they hold fast to being, what keeps them the happiest and healthiest. And I'll just tell you number 1, in order, is to move naturally. So the word nature is inspired within, naturally. They don't like pump iron or run marathons or need to join gyms because they live in environments that constantly nudge or force them into moving without thinking about it. They have gardens, they have mechanical conveniences that they have to take care of with their house and their yard work, like doing your own hand washing or going to collect your water, things like that. So being a part of that and then having to maintain that to keep your own self alive, I think has a lot to do with, being healthy and living longer. So
and when you talk about when you talk about healthy, it's not just physical health that we're talking about. We're talking about mental health, we're talking spiritual health, we're talking emotional health. And yes, physical health is part of that, but it's an all-encompassing health. And so I guess I wonder from a professional standpoint, Liz, when you say nature therapy, like give it to me like I'm a potential client. How, if you can define it, how do you define it? Like, what do you say nature therapy is from a therapeutical standpoint?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I say that nature therapy or nature-based therapy helps treat psychosomatic diseases, and you can pretty much you just have to be outdoors. You don't even really have to be outdoors to experience nature therapy. So it's really easy to sell because it's kind of everything. You can sit inside of your house and maybe you have like one of those cool like little running water things and just listening to the sounds of water within, inside, is essentially nature-based therapy. Earlier today, I watched an episode of Calm, which is like the app Calm, but there's also just like nature-based calming TV shows that don't really have words and they just have pretty sounds and imagery of beautiful places. So it's absolutely going and being outside. I'll offer just a walk or just going to a place and meeting outside. But it also can be things that are right within, the confines of your cell phone or, this laptop that we're kind of talking on. It's hard for me to sell things because I just feel so passionately about what the effects are and have lived experience. So it's really just kind of like, if you want to try some things, here's ways to promote your feeling of freedom and accessibility to nature. And here's some ways that I've found it to work for me or work for other people. So yeah.
It's interesting that you mention the water, like the water, I don't even know what you would call them, but I'm thinking of like a fake waterfall or like the fake water droplets that are on the rocks that a lot of people had in their homes in the 90s as that being considered nature therapy as well. And it takes me into my thought process of every single night I turn on my white noise, but my white noise, you can choose like white noise, brown noise, pink noise, whatever it is. And we always choose a setting called Trout Run because it sounds like a river. and we love the water. And then I thought about, when we go camping, you and I, we always try to put our tent up by the water because we love listening to the water. And I never considered that that is actually, even though I'm not outside, I'm sleeping in my bed, I'm listening to water, to the sound of water. I never considered that being nature therapy. That's such a good outlook. I love that.
Yeah, it's just something to celebrate that you already have within yourself. It's pretty awesome, honestly, like how many things it can be. And I'm already trying to kind of weave in some just like things that we kind of already do. I mean, I have a wind chime. I actually have three wind chimes, let's be real here. And so when the wind blows, I can, hear in my mind, oh yeah, the wind's blowing. And then I get to hear like the sounds of the different chimes and the different octaves in our in what we're hearing. So basically, nature therapy is using the senses, our natural senses, sight, sound, hear, touch. Sound and hear are the same ones, but you get the gist. So
I
yeah, anything
did.
that can stimulate the senses is, definitely nature therapy. In my perspective, maybe someone else would feel really differently, but um, the studies don't lie.
The studies don't lie, and I feel like because this is a technique that you integrate with patients, it makes your opinion very valid. Other professionals may have different ones. It's just like going to different doctors and getting other opinions. But I think that your qualifications here are pretty outruled considering how you go about your own personal health and wellness as well as what you do for your patients. And so I'm curious to know, like, a patient walks in, or a client, I'm not sure the correct term, walks in and you've been working with them for a while. And so let's say you want to introduce some form of nature therapy when you meet with them. What are things you've done with your clients in the past?
Yeah. I mean, even just giving like, a task for someone to try. It doesn't have to be with me, just as a little bit of a challenge, but things that we like to do together, going back to water, we are 70% water, and we are in, the earth is also 70% water, some irony between those numbers maybe, but um, if you find that you're outside or you hear a really cool sound, one thing that I share with my friends, children, adults, everyone is the deer ears. So you stick your hands up to your ears and you kind of point your ears in the direction of what you want to hear. You can face them forward or even bring your ears, your hands like facing. So your palms are facing toward the ears and you hear behind you. And it really enhances your ability to hear something so you can focus like a deer's ear, how they kind of peep and turn. You get that increased sense of sound. So I know for me personally, like sound is a big one for me. It feels like a massage sometimes to your whole body when you find sounds that you really like. It can be music, it can be a drum circle, anything like that. And then let me think of some other senses like taste. I have a piece of chocolate and I give you a little piece of chocolate and we sit and we talk about what that tasted like, being mindful of our experience with where we are. We could be out in nature, but you're still using your natural senses to, experience something. Sight, that feels like a given, but, just staring at something for a while, like a leaf, if you have plants inside your home, um, yeah, I mean, there's a reason why people have those glasses that are all different colored lenses. It might be for fashion, but it's also really cool to like spend your day in literal rose-colored glasses or purple glasses. So all of those things can just be that. You can be in the city with, purple colored glasses. And if you're appreciating what you're looking at and being conscientious of it, then that to me can be nature therapy. And all of those things I've tried with people, and there's laughter and there's connectedness through talking about that experience. And I've found that, so many people end a lot calmer than they started. Similar to me today. I feel really just soothed.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's funny because, as kids, your parents teach you to lay down in the grass and just look up at the sky and find the shapes in the clouds. But as adults, that's a literal therapeutic technique, right? Lay down in the grass. What do you feel? You feel the grass below you. Maybe you feel a little itchy if you're my fiance because he has horrible allergies. He's allergic to grass and everything else outside. Maybe you feel the wind blow, right? And you look up and you're looking at the clouds, and making pictures in the clouds as an adult, I find to be so much more interesting than as a kid, because as a kid, it's so expensive and you're like, that looks like an elephant. And the rest of the world is like, that's not an elephant. But as a kid, you're like, yes, it is. It's an elephant because I said it is. And wouldn't it be so interesting if we took that technique into adulthood and we laid on the ground in the grass and looked up at the sky and saw the clouds and said, that's a kangaroo, and it might not look anything like a kangaroo, but because that's, how we're feeling and what we're seeing in the moment, we just honor that. Why don't we do that as adults?
Yeah, as adults, it feels funny to, sit by yourself and smile at the sky. Someone might think you're kind of crazy or something. It's just hard. We sometimes lose that sense of freedom, that sense of like childlike wonder. And I think that's really the core of where my connection to nature takes place, is this like endless wonder and beauty in the clouds in the sky. And so as a therapist, as a friend, having some nature therapy skills to pass along, in the sense of like, let's sit down and do this together. It just creates this connection. And it also, I think, shows people like, oh, this is a skill that really works for me. And now that I've done it, it doesn't feel so weird to sit in the grass and enjoy myself. Like people really aren't, too concerned with what I'm doing to make myself happy. And if they are, I'll tell them about it. They can join me and look at the clouds. So I think that is one huge barrier. And that's something that I, really thrive in, is taking a group of people out who don't feel really safe in nature. And I'm like, wow, do you see how many shades of pink is in that flower? Can you even fathom it? And just being excited and genuinely stoked about what is in nature is just like, something I think I can take for granted sometimes, because it is just a practice skill that we have to keep working on.
I think that we take a lot of it for granted because we walk past it every day, right? You even called me on it on our last episode where you were like, Emily, standing outside is still you being in nature, even though you're in the city, right? But to me, someone who loves the outdoors, I'm like, no, take me to the mountains immediately. But it is something that we take for granted. And I think, go back to my question, why don't we look at the clouds the same way we do when we're children as adults? I think it has a lot to do with our ego, not because we look at egotistical as like this crazy word when we're adults, right? Like, oh, I don't want to be that. But from a spiritual standpoint, humans are like, your body is made from ego. Your soul is a separate entity. Your ego is what runs you a lot of the time as a human. And I think that ego gets in the way with that, where I don't sit and look at the clouds the same way I did as a child because I have to make it make sense, or I have to have control. Or maybe it's just that I could be doing something else more productive right now, right? And I think that gets away from us, that childhood, like, there's nothing better than sitting in the grass right now and staring at the sky. And a side note for anyone that may go on future retreats or hikes, camping trips with Alyssa and I, just know if you're going on a hike with us, we will stop to point out 5 different colors of pink on a flower. We will do it. We want to look at the bark on the trees. We want to look at the flowers. I have a picture of Alyssa literally laying on the ground, so excited just to see the smallest mushroom. We appreciate, it's my favorite picture of her. We appreciate all of it. And there's something so healing about that. As a person who suffers from anxiety, as a person who suffers from depression, as a person who has literally had a spiritual healer ask me if I've ever been diagnosed with PTSD because of everything I've gone through for the last 5 years, stopping to look at those little things and just recentering myself and reminding myself, there are 5 different colors in this flower. That's insane. That's so crazy. It doesn't matter if I have a job. Look at this flower. Look at it. It's something that we take for granted, like you said.
Would you just look at it?
Look at it.
And I think this is like, what a nice little segue of me kind of talking about the ego without really identifying it. And then Emily just with her spiritual wealth of knowledge, kind of bringing it back around for us. I think that's really just serendipitous. Also, it makes me think of this like word connection, which is, I think, one of the biggest things that we need to know, like within nature, the connection we have to nature, the connection we have to each other. I think Emily and I's relationship has blossomed and grown through a shared love of nature and being able to be in those places together and safe and free and comfortable. And so there's just a lot to say to, years of practice together and just being open to what the, beautiful pinks of the earth have to offer us.
Exactly. Like you might see, we are yoga lovers. You might see us on a rock doing some crazy yoga pose. You might see Alyssa cantilevered over the side of a cliff because she's rock climbing, or my fiance and I on the top of a mountain because that's what we like to do. But that's not what you have to do to feel that thing. Going back to what Alyssa said earlier, you can take your shoes off, step outside, just feel the grass underneath your feet. If you even want to take it into physical healing, for all of our friends out there who are suffering from MS, I have a friend very close to me. She's very much on the mind this morning because we just did a walk for MS this morning. And one of her symptoms is she either can't feel her hands sometimes or they hurt very, very badly. And she went to Hawaii and realized that by putting her hands in the ocean in salt water, she felt better than she has felt in the last 2 years. And you don't know that unless you go and touch it. You don't have to go to Hawaii to touch salt water, but you do just have to take the leap and try. Don't be afraid to just walk outside, wear your sunscreen, but do not be afraid to just take your shoes off. Who cares if you get muddy? Who cares if other people are watching you? It doesn't matter. If you feel stupid, that probably means you're about to have the most fun. So do it.
Yeah. Do it. And it's, there's this term, those like barefoot hippies. And so there's like this social stigma of like it might not being okay to go out and feel the earth. You don't need to be barefoot to stick your hands out on the ground or in the ocean. And if you're, still a little skeptical, maybe out there, I found this study and it's the top 5 health benefits of going barefoot, which we just kind of were talking about a bit. It detoxifies our system. It relaxes our nervous system. It improves our heart health. It improves blood flow, which is probably one of a big aspect of Emily's friend. Probably all these things. And it also reduces anxiety and sleep troubles. So there's definitely some real life benefits from this.
A word to all of my neighbors. I grew up in the best neighborhood as a child. So a word to all of my neighbors and my mother. I was actually just doing a therapeutic technique. Do not come for me for going but every day of my life. My mom, because when you're little, you clean your kid up and then all of a sudden she's in a beautiful pink brand new you bought her and she went outside barefoot and sat in a mud puddle. That was me as a child. So mom, just know I was just being one with nature. And also I hated that dress, but it was really me being one with nature for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, as a child, it's just natural. And it's still natural within us now. It just might take a little more effort as we have more things that we have to do in the day. I was really fortunate to have a lot of my years before deciding to become a therapist were completely outside for very long periods of time at times, being responsible for other people, just seeing all types of people out in nature, And so, yeah, just I've had so many life experiences that have made me extra grateful for um, what we have and what we can look back on as children. Like
Okay,
Emily
hold
said.
on. We need to run through some of these though. This one was a whole ass lumberjack. What were all of your titles of your outdoor jobs? Because she was out here with a chainsaw chopping down trees. We need to run through it. What all did you do?
Yeah, and there's a dialectical between that too, right? So, it's Earth Day. It feels weird talking about chopping down trees, but there's also like a science to that, mitigating for fires and, trying to keep the Pacific Crest Trail safe from fires. So that's why I was out cutting trees. We have wilderness areas in the United States and I believe all over the world, but I can't speak to those places. Um, and so wilderness areas are places that really should not or is not supposed to, cannot have any form of motor. Um, Sometimes planes will still fly over them, so it still feels a little skeptical on how do you get out in those wilderness areas. But we have tons of them. They're free oftentimes, but you can't take any like form of mechanical bike or anything like that. So we took cross cut chainsaws from back in the day when you just like use your hands and your abs to push alongside another person to cut down trees to make it safe. To be in those deep dark woods. I also worked with nature therapy in Washington as someone who received children who were forced into going on these long nature trips. So they really didn't want to be there at all. And watching them progress from, being so mad that they don't have a phone to being really happy and grateful that they, was forced into that opportunity, weird use of words, but yeah, I worked on the Appalachian Trail and helped people when they went to hike, thousands of miles for clarity, to connect with nature for a break. Some people maybe lost their jobs, looking for peace. So I would just go and like talk to those people and make sure they were okay. So many cool jobs that have just given me the best opportunities to um, update trails and keep the environment that we live in, safer for longer is really just the goal. And I think that's like one of the goals of Earth Day too, which has inspired this conversation.
Yeah. So we're recording this on April 15th and Earth Day is the 22nd, I believe. So a quick side note from nature therapy to remind you that every day should be Earth Day. Please recycle. Please, try and erase as much as your carbon footprint as you can. Love the earth because she loves you so much. Energetically, everything we do goes right back into her. So if you're having a bad day and you walk outside and feel the grass beneath your feet, you just give that energy right down to Mother Earth and she will take it from you and absorb it from you. So just remember to treat her with respect always. But Earth Day is a great reminder because sometimes we lose sight of that. But we want to keep her happy. We want to keep, the animals and the ecosystems happy, the plants. And I know you see those pictures of the polar bears going around on your Facebook. They are not fake, they are real. Global warming is happening. So do your part. The little things, as much as you think they don't matter, they absolutely do. And to continue to have nature therapy, we have to take care of it. We have to give back.
Yeah, and oh my gosh, your beautiful rendition and little speech for us kind of inspired me of a story. I went on vacation with my mom this past year to Duck, North Carolina, and the green turtles were hatching there. There was an organization, like a volunteer organization, completely with people who would go and protect the nest of the green turtle. The green turtle like comes out one time in 30 years to lay their nest. And like 1 out of every 1,000 turtles already live based on, what they have to get past to get to the ocean, the birds, then they get into the ocean, and then there's the sharks and all the other scary creatures of the deep. And with that, it's like, okay, our overall temperature of the earth has increased by I think like 1 degree Fahrenheit. And with that, the turtles, because of that temperature change, it affects how they birth, and they are having more women than male turtles. And so that's a huge problem. There's a lot of the female turtles will not, be able to have eggs. And so it's just like these tiny little things that are happening right in our coastal waters in the US, are really deeply affected by the impact that we have. And a lot of the time, it's not really one person's responsibility. We can do the best that we can as one human, but it is a lot of those like big business, big corporations. That's how history of the Earth Day was kind of coined, was all of these like giant organizations were kind of ruining the Earth, and we woken up to that. And that's how this day kind of happened. So thanks to the oil spills and the turtles surviving amidst them.
Amen. And so we know that you actually came on here to listen to an animal documentary. We would give you one if you would let
You're
us.
welcome.
You're welcome. We are not David Attenborough, but we would love to be him. So that being said, in order to continue to have, the absolute gift and pleasure, hell yeah, I'm so jealous you got to see that. To be able to be one of those people like Alyssa and stand on the beach and watch those turtles hatch, you have to be nice to the beach, people. Recycle, throw your garbage away, don't leave it there. Especially for those of us who are trying to heal in nature, which is the whole point of us talking today. Beach is a great place to heal. Like I was talking about my friend, her hands in the ocean water, but it's not a great place if your Bud Light can is underneath my feet. So pick it up. Pick it up. Speaking of great places though, Liz, so I was thinking about it while we were talking just now. You had said we talked about the beach, we've talked about, grass, you can go outside, you can make an environment anywhere you want. What is your favorite environment to heal in? Are you a beach person? I know you like rocks, love a cliff, right? Like where do you learn the most about yourself?
Oh, that's tough. I think I learned the most about myself in that type 2 fun. So type 2 fun is like, it was kind of miserable while it was happening, but when you look back on it, you viewed it as a fun time, or at least you learned something from it. So like going to the top of a mountain, rock climbing, kind of like testing yourself on these multi-pitch climbs where you're 1,000 feet up off the ground and then you have to belay yourself back down. That definitely gives me a lot of like learning about my own ways to handle stress and things that do scare me. But when it's not a stressful time and you just want to ground down into nature, I don't even think I could say a preference. I can go to the beach, I can go to the desert if I can have something to look at. I don't know if there's like a specific place. Water's helpful, but oh my goodness, the kinds of like colored lizards and bugs that you get to see just out, in your back door. Like I have a couple flowers that are springing and I go look at them every day in my backyard. I'm just like, oh, look at that bee on that flower. So I don't know my favorite place, but I would love to hear your answer, Em.
Yeah, I'm very drawn to mountain air specifically. I definitely love the water as a sense of if I had to choose my favorite element, I would pick water. It's so funny. I was just talking about this today. I love water because it's both, all the elements can be, but I believe water to be the most destructive and the most calming all at the same time. But there is something about mountain air, whether you are on top of the mountain, which for me, it's kind of like you said, the too fun. I have a lot of revelations when I do that with Troy or myself or with you. There's a lot that comes from that about who I am as a person. But there's also moments where Troy and I may just be camping at the base or driving through to our next destination where there is something about the air that is so calming to me. I just feel at peace. And I remind myself that as someone who suffers greatly from anxiety, as someone who suffers greatly from depression, it's a great reminder for me of how small I am and how all of the things that I'm worried about, they don't really matter because we are just these weird little bags of flesh hanging out on a rock in outer space. That doesn't even, that sounds like a movie. Like it doesn't even sound real. So for me, mountain air, being in the mountains, really, it brings me a lot of healing. It brings me a lot of perspective. And I actually never thought about it until the first time I visited you in Colorado, because I was going through a huge transition then, and so were you. And we, for everyone listening, there was a moment where like we didn't speak for an hour. We just were staring at what was in front of us. And I have never felt more ready for my life to start than I did in that moment. I was just like, I'm okay. What I just went through, I know I'm okay. I remember snapping out of that and being like, we haven't spoken in an hour. And then thinking to myself, I feel so much better right now. Like I came home from that trip and I remember crying to my mom and being like, that changed my life. That changed my life. That moment, just being in the mountains. And then I always loved hiking and I always loved being outdoors. I grew up, my dad is big into the outdoors and that kind of stuff. And my mom ran Camp Souls, Holla, Greensburg, Salem. It's the one and only time I will ever do that sentence. But after that trip, I fell in love with it even more because I felt whole as a person and I really felt that spirit, just that calm, that spirit move through me. And I knew I would be okay. So for me, mountain air for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. This like ability to trust ourselves comes from just being very quiet. And you kind of like really nailed it on what mindfulness is like it's being in a space and being there, and then you get to listen to your own inner thoughts that don't have that judgment anymore. And they're saying to you, I am okay. I am right where I'm supposed to be. I trust myself. I will breathe. And you just come back to that breath. And I think that that is like the juicy bits of life, the juicy bits of, nature therapy, mindfulness, Emily's journey in that moment. Um, it's just everything. To me, nature therapy is everything. It's all the good things in our life.
Oh, relaxing breath. She felt it after that, people. Side note, did I ever tell you that after that trip is when I gave myself permission to date Troy?
You gave yourself permission. Yeah.
I did not for the longest time. I was seeing my fiance and I was like, no, I think I'll just be alone for a while. And then I came back from that trip and I was like, I am whole. I am healed. This is fine. Everything's good.
I'm not alone.
I'm not alone. And I don't have to be alone to be okay.
And we're not alone in nature. And finding that like sweet, soothing, piece of life from Mother Nature, she's the mother, is just really a gift. And I hope that people are able to see it. And then on the other hand, there's a ton of trauma around the earth. She's gone through so much trauma. I've gone through my own like sitting circles with women who we ask prompts about, like, how does earth make you feel today? Or like, how do you feel sitting here today? And it's gotten really emotional because there's a lot of just like, oh man, I feel like I wish I were doing more. I, wish that road wasn't right there. Or when I'm listening to sounds and hearing the cars, like I'm judging the sound. And so it is really hard sometimes to be present in nature therapy, or you're so present that you're like, oh my gosh, why is the wilderness area having planes flying over it? And so there is this like space we need to hold for grief, for our own grief in that space. And then also, the imprint on the earth. And so it's really hard to talk about nature therapy without talking about what nature has gone through, what we've all gone through. I don't know. It's just like really in full circle, and it's hard to leave certain parts of ourselves out when trying to heal in nature, whatever that looks like.
Well, if we reference back to episode 1, you might recall me talking about how we are all actually one entity. We are one soul. All souls are connected. That includes the souls that we give back to Mother Earth, right? There's a book, I don't want to botch the title, so let me look at it. The Hidden Life of Trees. I read it because I saw my cousin was reading it, and it talks about how trees literally have their own interconnected communication channels. And it's very interesting. And to think that we are all connected in that way, the earth going through trauma, we absorb that. And us going through trauma, she absorbs that. And it is all connected, just like you said, it all comes right back around. And you have to, if you're going to dive into this and you're going to be someone who heals in this way, you do have to pay your respects in that way, right? It's almost like grieving a few things that we lost, almost like a family member. We didn't lose her yet, but we definitely have to take better care of her for sure. For sure.
It's powerful to hold space for ourselves in nature, and it's powerful to be able to find moments where we can hold space for the earth and then have a balance where it's like, I can't let this consume me. So, similar to the news, everything in our lives, just having this balance, which, the earth is a master of until we come in and botch it around a bit.
Do you ever feel, I think it's interesting that you say sometimes you ask, how does the earth make you feel today? Because as I'm sitting here right now in my house, in my chair, if you asked me that question, I would say, really sad. It makes me sad because I saw all the flooding damage in downtown Pittsburgh today. And in that flooding damage, so much garbage, so much plastic, so much debris, and it makes me angry. But if I were at the tippy top, 14,000 feet up on a mountain, I would be like, Earth makes me feel happy today because I'm here connecting with it. And there's not a lot of humans at the top of that mountain to ruin it for me. So I think that's a great perspective. And you're right, that does hold a lot of power because depending on where you are at, it shifts your perspective on how you feel. And I think we can bring that back around to ourselves. If you say, how do you feel about yourself today? I don't have a great body image going on for myself today. But if you ask me that in a week, I might feel differently. It's definitely a lot of power there.
Yeah. And on earthday.org, I was kind of just like perusing a little bit. And in 1970, Denver was the country's 17th most polluted city. And so just holding those things in perspective, like we can still make changes. Denver is no longer one of the most pollutant cities. I can still see the haze sometimes, but then like Emily was saying, once you get on top of that mountain, like you'll see the smoke if there's fires, but you really are in that sweet oxygenated air up there. But I guess just coming back is just like, it's not too late to do something for yourself, within yourself, to educate yourself. Maybe that's how you spend Earth Day, or, your first bout of nature therapy is just kind of like looking up some stuff or checking out a podcast, a video, this podcast. Good job. Thanks for being here. And yeah, just like finding ways that it brings you joy to find ways to help nature. Like maybe you're upcycling and you like to go thrifting so that things don't, go to a trash pile, not buying, fast fashion things, using containers that you can reuse. Before we even get to recycle, we try to reduce and reuse those things. So just being mindful in our own lives. And then also like, okay, if I'm going to be this conscientious of the earth, like how can I be conscientious of my own self? Like, should I apply that sunscreen? Should I put on some coconut oil before bed because I live in the driest, state that I've ever lived in, not in the US, but the driest one I've ever lived in. It's just, holding all of these things and, finding your connections to communicate them or to experience them. Maybe you don't talk about them. Maybe you go to a yoga class and just like put with your intention of thinking about the earth or, your relationship to it. There's no wrong way to therapize yourself with nature.
So you say there's no wrong way. So do you come across misconceptions of what nature therapy is? For example, what you said to me on the last recording, which is, Emily, stepping outside in the city is still nature. You're still in grass, still nature. What, like, do you find common misconceptions? And if you do, what are they?
Yeah, I think the common misconception is like, I'm not doing it right. It's like, that's like the biggest thing I'm up against when I'm working with people. Because half the time I'm like, you're already doing it. Like, you just got your prescription changed so you can see nature as best as you can. Like, you're doing these tiny little things to make your experience in nature better. You're saving up for a trip to go to the beach. All of those things are absolutely like hand in hand with what nature therapy is. So other misconceptions, yeah, I think it's just that like there's a certain way to do it. Maybe a misconception is like thinking you can just go out in it and then not take care of it. I think that's maybe my pet peeve, are the people who go spend the whole day and then leave a garbage bag full of trash that they didn't throw away. Like, it's great that you put the garbage in the bag, but you didn't, throw it away. And so now it's just out here in nature. Or just like, you could recycle this. Some recycling plants don't go and are recycled. That's a whole different story for a whole nother day. But yeah, I think those are some misconceptions that I've run into.
I want to talk about the misconception of doing it wrong, because I think even myself, as someone who is an active practitioner of this, gets stuck in the idea of what nature is, right? We've already heard that from me. And so even just hearing the fact that Denver was one of the most polluted cities, because Colorado holds this idealization of being, just the Rocky Mountains, and that's all it is. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's so interesting to dive into that misconception of doing it wrong, because I am someone, and I'm sure there are people listening to this out there that relate to just not diving into things head first because I don't want to be wrong. I'm uncomfortable with that. And I will give you the biggest shout out for that, because you are one of I have a few friends that do this to me, but you are definitely one of them, where you will just be like, Emily, just shut up and do it. Just like, well, just climb the rock. Who cares if you do it wrong? You're supposed to do it wrong the first time you do something. But that is a thing that people go through, and I am one of them. I don't often just dive into things because I like to be good at them first. It's very uncomfortable. It's interesting that people would be afraid to be outside wrong. There's no wrong way to exist, No.
And you don't have to dive into it. You can just dip your toe in, like just getting out there and like, getting into a harness and putting your hands on a rock or not getting into a harness, just like literally sticking your hands on rocks outside. Like, that is good enough for me. So I hope it's good enough for you. So yeah, it's just kind of that vibe still, is just like, it's great once you dive in. Oh boy. Like, once you're in there, you can't really get out. You might, wait around and like take moments, and, the seasonal affective disorder, the weather's really crummy and you're like, oh man, I'm sad. It's like, yeah, you're not dove in right there in that moment, but like, you don't have to be to access like these tools and the things that we can like find that's maybe just dipping our toes in, and that's good enough.
Let's take tree hugging hippie and make it a positive. Let's all be tree hugging hippies. Just here's a challenge for you. After listening to this on your way to work or on your way home, or if you're sitting inside and listening to it, I feel like even if it was a tree that was planted by your city, I feel like you can find one. Go outside and hug it, or just touch a leaf, or say something kind to the tree and say, I hope that you are feeling great within your root system today, and just feel that energy back and forth, because like Alyssa said, there's no wrong way to do it. You can do it any way that you want. Right?
And if that's not empowering, like, then talk to me and we can find some more empowering ways for you to find nature therapy, because there are so many.
What are the cards? Do you make cards with people? Let's make cards today. What are they called?
Oh, yes. Okay, so I am diving into DBT. I'm already pretty deep in the waters of nature therapy. That's my jam. DBT is a little bit. It has like worksheets the whole way through, so I really love that as a therapist, to have resources to give to people, and like actual tools that you can use without having to talk to me. Or Googling something. But there's emotion regulation, and so that's something that we're trying to do as human, regulate our emotions. And there's something called a pleasant events list, and so it's like a little thing of homework, and it has like a checkbox next to all of these suggested things, and some of them literally are nature therapy. I encourage us to maybe make our own, but an example from this like DBT study based worksheet, the ones that I found that are nature based: lying in the sun, thinking to myself, I've done a full day's work. That's not nature based therapy, but just like literally the thoughts you think. So thinking like, wow, that's so pretty, is something you could check off your list. What do you think might be some that you would like to add to a pleasant events list of yours?
Yeah, I don't think I might add. I think we should all hang up from this today when you're done listening, when we're done recording. And Alyssa and I are going to make our own little, what would you call it? It's not a card. It's
Just a listicle, a list.
Pleasant events. That's what you said. Your pleasant event list. Let's make a pleasant event list, and we'll put ours up on our Instagram for you guys to see. But if I'm recalling pleasant events, just things that make me feel good, and I make them specific to nature, I would say the experience that I shared earlier of the first time I ever came to Colorado and visited Alyssa. I would say the first time I ever got Troy to actually hike up a mountain. That was great, because he has previously been known to be afraid of heights. So I was so proud of him, and the look on his face when we got to the top was just priceless. And then it was a Pocahontas moment where the wind came and like all these different colors of like debris and leaves came, and I was like, wow, colors of the wind, we're here. So I would think about that. And I think the last one I'll put on my list for now, I'll probably have more later, would be when I lay in my backyard with my dog in the sun. He loves the sun. He just loves feeling that warmth on his face and on his, I call it his pork belly, because he looks like a potbelly pig. And just absorb, right? Absorb, can confirm he does. If you Google potbelly pig baby, it will be my dog. That said, we already know I get a lot of healing from him. So just being outside in the sun with him and absorbing all of that energy from the air around me, the sun around me, the grass beneath me, him beside me, that's not even just a particular memory. It's something actively that I do that I know always makes me happy. So that will be on the list for me, for sure.
Yeah. And you're doing another skill is like you're recalling happy memories, which can be a whole list in of itself, like all of your past outside nature experiences that are just like highlights in your mind that you go back to and revisit when you need them. And also you called out different mindfulness things. So like, this is beneath me, this is around me, I see this. And so you're like spinning within all of these pleasant events, on a large scale and a small scale. I want to lay outside and I want to go on a vacation and everything in between and all the little bits. That is, what this is about. So I can't wait to hear, Emily, your list of course. And maybe we can like try to do some together or like
Yeah.
do one at the beginning of a podcast or something. And then I also look forward to reading some of the other lists if there are any out there coming forward.
Yeah, when you finish listening today, friends, please make your lists and send them our way. We don't have to share them on any platform if you don't want us to, but we would just love to see what makes you happy, but if you give us permission, we would also love to share and see what your lists have to say.
And to the theme of water that we've kind of like touched upon, you don't need to dive into this. You can stick your toes in, make a list that's 3 things. Make a list of one thing and go do it. And then once you do it, then add to it. Like there's no wrong way. This list that I'm seeing here, if you just want to like do something from this list and let us know what it was like for you, it's 225 items and then it says space for other. So there's no wrong way to find nature therapy in your life.
Amen. And as per usual, Alyssa will link all of the things. She is our techie end of this because we all know I'm not going to do it. She will list all of the links on our Spotify so that you have access to the list that we are talking about, as well as the other resources that we have used today. But we thank you all so much for joining in once again. And we're so happy you're here, and we're happy to be here connecting with you and with each other and doing something we love. And we will talk to you again soon.
You are so loved. You are so held. Have a wonderful day.